Welcome to freshmi.com. My name is Eric and this is part 3 of our cube texturing tutorial. I wanted to show you a few more things here. I created a new texture on my desktop. There it is. Now it's oriented different. If you look at that and you look at that, they're obviously different. Alright, let's look at this. We've got our top right here, and then we've got our back above it, and then front, bottom down below, and then our right and left side to the sides. So we got to keep that in mind, and what we're going to do is we're going to lay out our UVs in the same orientation. Alright, let's go back into Maya. Let's open up our UV texture editor. Select our box, so now we can see our UVs. This is how we had them, and we're going to change these around because it's going to be some more useful information for you when you are doing your UV mapping. Alright, let's find out where the top is. I'm just going to go to face select mode, select this top face, and now in the UV texture editor you can see clearly where the UVs are for the top of our cube. Alright, and if I go to edge mode, select this top edge, you can see that these UVs over here on the right are the ones that need to come up here on top because these are the UVs for the back. Hope that makes sense to you. Because this edge connects with the UVs on the back of our cube. So since those two are connecting, then this over here has to be the back of our cube. And again, this is the right edge of the top of our cube, which means it's connected to the right side of our cube. So if you look at our texture editor, this edge is connected to this edge because they're both highlighted. So that means this area right here are the UVs for the right side of our cube. So this right here has got to be the left side, and this right here has got to be the bottom. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and maximize this since we know what's what. Alright, so we want to move these UVs over here to the top. But before we can do that, we need to cut it. If we don't cut it, watch what happens. I'm going to shift, with this edge selected, I'm going to shift, right click, move and sew. It kind of pulls all that together. We don't want that. So let me undo. We want to select this edge and we want to cut this off. So with that edge selected, shift, right click, and then click on cut UVs. And what that does, it just cut it there. So now if we select this top edge again over here, which is actually the edge that's going to be sewn up here. So if we shift, right click, move and sew, you can see it moves all that up there now instead of pulling it all together. Alright, now this and this is the top, this is the edge on the upper right, and this is the edge on the upper left. So what we need to do is we need to move these up and we need to move these on the right side up. So let's make a cut here and a cut right there. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of those edges, shift, right click, cut UVs. So now we've just made a cut there, so these two sides are separate. So now we can select, right click, or shift right click, move and sew. Select this edge on the other side, shift, right click, move and sew. Oops, there we go. Alright, so now our cube, the UVs on our cube are laid out like our texture is. Just like our texture. Alright, let's go back in there. Now if you look at the cube, we could put our checkerboard pattern back on here to kind of make sure there's no stretching and everything. But I can pretty clearly tell that because these UVs are not lined up, we've got this stretching over here. See how it's not lined up with our edge of our cube? So in the texture editor, right click UV, I'm going to select these UVs, and with my move tool, I'm just going to start lining these up. Just like if you're moving vertices, it's kind of the same thing, except these aren't vertices, because you can see when I move this, it's not moving anything on our cube. It's UV, so you got to kind of think a little differently there. Now I can use, just to make it easier, I'm just going to use my manipulator handle to line this up. So this red arrow, I'm going to increase the size of my manipulator handle by pressing the plus button on my keyboard a few times. So now I can use the manipulator handle as a guide and just kind of line that up. I'll select that UV there, line it up. Same thing with the bottom. Line those up. And there we go. Everything's lined up now. I'm going to select all the UVs. And I'm going to use my move tool just to kind of put that back down inside of our quadrant. You always want your UVs to fit inside this quadrant. I don't care how many you have, you want them all to be inside that quadrant. Alright, I am going to shrink my manipulator handle back up by pressing the minus button a few times. There we go. And now let's go ahead and add our texture. We could do a UV snapshot, but there's really no need at this point, and I'll show you why. Because since we're really not going to be taking this in and doing anything exciting with the texture, we're going to leave the texture exactly like it is. We're not going to make any changes to the texture, and we're not going to add anything or take away anything. So since we're not going to be changing our texture in any way, I'm just going to go ahead and bring this texture in, and then we'll line up our UVs to the texture. So let's go ahead and bring that texture in. With our object selected, you can either go to Windows, Rendering Editors, over to Hypershade. And I know, now I'm not naming anything in this. Typically if I do a project, I would have all my materials and objects named. But for its tutorial purposes, I'm not naming anything. But I definitely know that Lambert 2 is what I have applied to the cube. So I'm just going to double click on Lambert 2. It opens up the attributes for it. Let me close the Hypershade out. Over here in the attributes, you'll see the color swatch. To the far right, it's a button. It's no longer a checkerboard because we've got stuff connected to it. So I'm going to click on that button, and now we're right back to where we have our texture loaded right there. To the right of that is a button with a picture of a folder. I can click that, and now I can navigate and choose a different texture. I'm going to choose the new one, which is the Cube Texture 2. Click Open, and now we have it on our cube. You can see it doesn't line up very good though. Alright, I'm going to select my cube, go back into the UV Texture Editor window. I'm going to go back to Image and turn on Display Image. I turned it off earlier, but now I'm going to turn it on. And you can see our texture. And again, if it's too bright, you can dim it by going up to Image, and then there's a Dim Image option. You can either turn that on or off just by clicking on it. So I've got mine dim so I can see a little better. Alright, this is very simple. You know, I could go back into GIMP and I can change my texture to fit my UVs, but I can also take these UVs, right click UV, and I can just take my UVs and start lining it up with my texture. So I'm going to select all the UVs, just move these over, and actually they line up quite nicely. Let's say it didn't. Let's say it was a little off, and let me just kind of pull it in a little bit. Let's say it was like this. So I could just come in here and just start lining everything up. Let me maximize this. I can bring these over, line that up. I'm just doing these one at a time just to kind of show you that it doesn't really matter as long as you get all these lined up right. It's going to look good. Let's get that lined up over there. Bring these down. Bring these over. Bring this bottom down. Now I can't see a line, an edge of where it separates the front and the bottom. So I'm just going to select these UVs and I'm just going to guess. It's all the same color, so it's not really going to matter. But I know that this front face is square, and I know the bottom face is square. So as long as I get these to where they look square, it's going to look fine. Alright, so our UVs are lined up with our texture, which means that our cube should look okay. So let's shrink that down. If we look at our cube, there it is. So you can see as we move these around, let's go to our bottom since that's what we're changing. You can see how it moves it. So as long as we have everything lined up right. So if we had these UVs pulled down too far, you'll see the black. Whoops. You'll see the black. So we just take those UVs, just pull it up and line it up until it's gone. And that's it. It's that simple. And one more thing I want to show you. Rotating UVs. I don't think we ever did any of that. If you have to rotate any UVs, let me right click UV. Let me just drag across all these UVs. To rotate, you can use these buttons up here at the top of the UV Texture Editor window. Or you can just go to your rotate tool. And one thing that I usually use a lot is just pressing and holding down the letter J. And now I can click and rotate in 15-degree increments. So it's really easy to get stuff lined up back straight. And that's how you rotate UVs. And that concludes this tutorial. Thanks for watching.